So now we're back for the final part of the conference. We'll start with a 30-minute conversation followed by a panel discussion with a few more people. And before we move to that panel discussion, let's now move to the experiment, because we haven't done this before, of a conversation between two creative great minds in psychedelics. We're going to explore how the principles of design interact with the world of psychedelics, shaping innovative approaches to healing, community building, and global impact. We're thrilled to have Natalie Lyla Ginsberg and Devon Phillips, two esteemed professionals from the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, better known as MAPS, to join us on stage today. Devon serves as the Community and Partnerships Officer at MAPS. In his role, Devon is instrumental in fostering relationships and building a vibrant community around the mission of MAPS. With a background in community engagement and partnerships development, Devon brings a wealth of experience in creating collaborative environments that support the advancement of psychedelic research and education. Devon's work focused on leveraging the power of community to drive meaningful change and further goals of MAPS. Natalie is the Global Impact Officer at MAPS. With a keen focus on the broader implications of psychedelic research, Natalie works to ensure that the benefits of psychedelics reach communities worldwide. Her role involves advocating for policy changes, promoting public education, and fostering global partnerships to enhance the impact of MAPS' work. Natalie's background in social work and policy advocacy equips her with a unique perspective on how psychedelics can be integrated into society for maximum positive impact. Please welcome Devon and Natalie. The stage is all yours.
What's up, everybody? I think Natalie is in the crowd. I think she needs to be invited onto the stage. Maybe?
Yeah, she's invited. She'll be here in a moment.
Perfect. There she is. Okay. What's up, everybody? We are super excited to be here. Online conferences during the week are so funny. It's like you have all these meetings and then gotta go to the conference real quick and then back into the meetings, but it's a good break in between. But yeah, we're really happy to be here. This conversation design, I don't feel like has a ton of platforms or conferences. So shout out to the Psychedelic Design team for building this and promoting this, and I hope this grows over the years. And I think y'all came onto my radar from Natalie, actually. She sent a link of y'all's color wheel in the psychedelic space. And I immediately thought, yeah, these are our people. Definitely want to hang out with y'all and learn more. So, and now we're here. So yeah, it's gonna be an exciting and fun conversation, and we are lucky to have it.
Yeah, just to echo Devon, we're so grateful for the work Psychedelic Design has been up to outside of the conference, and this is such a special opportunity to have these conversations. Devon and I are particularly excited because since we've even known each other, we've been in deep conversation about the role of design in the psychedelic space. I mean, you should see our DMs from years of sending each other every, different fashion line or artist or people using art to communicate around psychedelics. And in particular, we're really passionate about how design communicates this psychedelic work to the culture. MAPS does a lot of work around public education and community building. And so Devon and I are always thinking about how often the power of design and social change is kind of undervalued and not given its fair due. So we're really grateful for this conference and the wide range of conversations holding, this under this design umbrella and this design way of thinking.
Yeah, to add on to the DM. So it'll be like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We'll be getting notifications. I'm like, Natalie, when do you sleep? If you ever sleep. And it's late in New York. I know it's late over there. But yeah, so to start, we're just gonna have a conversation, just ask each other some questions and kind of riff on this beautiful world of psychedelics. But to start, Natalie, what role does design play in mainstreaming psychedelics?
So this is, a very big question, but one of the ways I like to think about it is it's actually one of our MAPS principles is set the setting. And design has a way of setting the context and the container for the message or for something, or in and of itself communicating so much. So I think we often don't consider that, but when you come to a web page, for example, before you even read the content, you're getting a vibe, you're seeing things, there's a way of setting up that context. And design is so powerful. I mean, many ways, but it allows us to communicate non-verbally. And of course, design can also include words and, communicating verbally. But for me, there's a deep power in what is communicated without words, when there are things that words can't capture, or maybe there are things that allow kind of a different kind of communication, a connection to a different community in just the way something is presented. And it's really kind of about meeting people where they're at. So when we're thinking of mainstreaming and introducing people to psychedelics who might not be familiar, or who might be familiar with psychedelics with certain stigmas associated from the war on drugs, or the 60s kind of countercultural movement, when a lot of people think about psychedelics, the actual design comes to mind of these kind of like beautiful chaotic colors and swirls and things that represent revolution or different things from the 60s. And there's a lot of beauty in that, and that also can prevent some people from being open to understanding more. So I think that's kind of a really powerful thing of design in the mainstreaming of psychedelics. And I know Devon and I think a lot also about how to honor where psychedelics have come from, because we are seeing some companies or research or different things that try to like distance themselves through design from that. We are not these crazy hippies, we're serious scientists. And, there are roles to play in that. But I think there's also power in how design can help connect. Maybe there's images or things that allow kind of to bridge, like build on that culture, but presented in a way that's kind of more accessible to people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love what you said about meeting people where they're at. I mean, design, psychedelics aside, we see things every single day. And one of my favorite sayings, I had a mentor when I was in college, and he told me, no one buys a yearbook they don't see themselves in. And design allows you to create multiple yearbooks, because psychedelics is such an umbrella term. It's more vertical of a lifestyle, right? It's not the substance itself. So it's your ability to build things and images and music or whatever to allow a pathway for different populations, different cultures, different groups to see themselves in this journey, wherever that's at, whether they agree with psychedelics or not. You give them the opportunity to start the process, which is really important. Because again, it's influences us every single day. We see things every single day. And it all has a specific way how it really impacts us.
Absolutely. Kind of along those lines, curious, Devon, how do creative design-centered industries like fashion, art, and music help shift public perceptions and reduce stigma around psychedelics?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably take the industry part out of it, because in modern business, industry has capitalized by building materialistic, scalable priority of things, and sometimes gutted creativity. But in all things, so speaking to the creative resources themselves of music, fashion, or creative expression, I mean, humans have been a lot of things in our life and our evolution, but we've always been artists. It's something that harmonizes with us deeply. It really influences the way that we walk, the way that we talk. And it's a language that we all speak. I mean, no matter what y'all's backgrounds of those listening, whether you're a doctor or a chemist or a barber right now, I'm sure there's a song that you have in your head that you listen to and you just go, damn, and it just brings you back, or it creates an emotion. And because of that, it allows us to get in places that others can't. I personally, I grew up in West Texas. I was raised by a single mom, so she worked 2 or 3 jobs. So I spent a lot of times in the basketball courts and the skate parks and the barbershops. And that really molded who I was and my perspective, for better or for worse. It can go both ways. But in those places, what we talked about were fashion, and what we talked about was music, and what we talked about was art, and then also the people who are making those things. What we didn't talk about is the latest Johns Hopkins study. Not saying that's not important at all, incredibly important, but Cornel West says a true education is a transformation, and you need to pair information with a cultural vehicle to really transform the public and society, and that's through creative expression. So I think the way that, these arts are able to do it is by using the means. So how we do psychedelics today is we should place psychedelic education in these projects with art and with music in ways that can reach these populations with an educational infrastructure. What I mean by that is we shouldn't just get with artists and say, hey, I'm a big artist, I do psychedelics, you should too. Is we should use the pathway of, say, music, build a project with them that has educational resources. We have like integration workbooks. We have all types of ways that we can both educate the artists and also the public, and use that for a way to get into these other areas of population, like the skate parks and the basketball courts, to influence these populations.
Totally. And I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that many artists and musicians and people in creative industries have, used psychedelics, talk about psychedelics in their music and their art. I see there's a lot of overlap in the way that, art can call us to vision, design calls us to vision something that's not there, and to be creative in that way. That psychedelics can also be a tool in kind of facilitating that, which is something that is not always kind of a standard way, modus operandi in our society. And there's also, this spiritual element to making art, that and to designing, that kind of being open to this creation. And I know psychedelic work also kind of allows you to kind of tap into that in the same way. So I think there's very powerful back and forth. And the way that also when artists are connecting with, psychedelics, and they can express that in a range of different ways, and that gives a lot of communities new ways of seeing it that might not be what they had in their mind and didn't associate it with it. And now they see a new kind of art, they hear a different kind of song that does resonate and allows them to understand a little bit more, if that, calls them.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I mean, again, growing up and then even now, like you look up to people who do things that inspire you or do things you want to do. And if we can have people, and that's why it's so important to, I hate using the word influencer, sorry if it sounds cringe right now, but to responsibly influence the influencer. Because again, we're not trying to advertise. We're educators and collaborators. We're not advertisers. No disrespect to anyone in for-profit. It's not like a for-profit thing, but it's like to start doing that, you truly need to educate the partnerships that you work with, be it an organization, an individual. So when we do these creative partnerships with an artist or an athlete, whatever, we have meetings with them and we go through their questions, we go through their stories, because we want this to be a partnership where they're truly educating. And again, we're not just a billboard trying to say, look at maps, we do psychedelics like this big person here. It's a really educational format, because we know these expressive means reaches so many people in so many ways. So we know it can be really impactful.
Yeah. I'm called to almost double click on the fashion one for some right now, and thinking about how there are so many kind of fashions associated with psychedelics in a certain context. And I believe it's so important to radically self-express, and what that shows when people can be their full selves. And I'm also thinking about times where, I was the policy director for many years at MAPS. And when I would go lobby and, meet with legislators, I would, put on my pearl earrings. I would use fashion as a way of communicating, like in a way that I believe helped people hear what I was saying. I love my tie-dye shirts that I also wear in other contexts, but showing up in that way would not allow me, I think, to communicate. And so I think it's a very powerful tool that we don't often think about. And even thinking, how the fashion industry over the last few years has really reflected culture and included mushrooms and different psychedelic designs, and so many from the top brands to every across the board, just seeing that permeate our culture just visually everywhere does have a kind of a normalizing effect. And of course, along with that normalizing effect, it's absolutely essential to combine that with education and decriminalization and a lot of other key elements. But that does play an important role. And yeah, I think it's really exciting to think more intentionally about it. And I will say I'm a little disappointed that when these brands were doing all these things, they didn't, for the most part, really reach out to do that kind of intentional wraparound work. And I will say that a few musicians who have engaged more with psychedelics actually have reached out a bit more and kind of talk about their experiences, people making albums talking about processing trauma with psychedelics. So that's been really encouraging to see art as this vehicle to speak about more difficult things with psychedelics as well.
Yeah, this is kind of random, but it's popped up. Snoop Dogg made a words of affirmation album last year with kids, which is again random, but yeah, it's yeah, the fashion part. We can go next question. Kind of talk about fashion all day, but it is interesting because fashion has many cases in our culture. I mean, for years it's been a way to identify groups for countercultural revolution in different countries. I live in New York. The fashion says a lot of things here. There's a lot. I know introverted people that when you see out, they wear the most vibrant things possible, and it's a way sometimes to find community. But with the mainstream, there's also like a materialistic side thing too. So you always have to be careful of that. And I agree with Natalie. Sometimes when a larger brand do go this route, it's not for the education or to push the mission of psychedelics and what it can do for an individual. It's just because they might think it's cool right now. So when approaching this again, this is being very careful, doing your due diligence about why you're working with this organization or individual. And if there is a pathway to education, that should definitely be the route you should take. But now I think the next question for you is, what are design-centered ways to build community and advocacy in this space?
There are so many exciting ways that design plays such a role in community building. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling super well right now. But one way that I'm called to speak about is one of my favorite personal design projects at MAPS, which was when I joined MAPS almost 10 years ago. Next month, we had a table at a Grateful Dead show, which is probably the more classic design associated with psychedelics in some ways. But, we showed up we were preparing for it and had all these brochures. And I was like, we need stickers to give out. And we had an amazing supporter who designed the sticker that some of you might have seen today that says support psychedelic science with the MAPS logo, which was designed for that Grateful Dead show. And then recognizing the power from that, we made it for the concert. People were, happy to have it. But then weeks later, getting stories and pictures from people seeing I saw this sticker, in a bathroom in a bar in this country or on a chairlift here, and saying people put it on their laptop, and then someone approached them in a cafe, and it turned out to be a really important relationship for them. Built in one instance, they literally started a whole project together that I'm thinking of, and using this on people's phones, just having this tool of communicating, part of what you're about, allows people to find others, build community, ask questions in a really deep way that I don't want to underestimate something like a sticker, or a tote bag when there's something powerful. And it, this had the words on it, but it doesn't even have to have words. Sometimes it can communicate a lot, especially about psychedelics through other things, maybe ayahuasca images or different, I'm thinking of the range of things people use in design in their objects and what they're wearing to communicate. And when community building, you're trying to help people find each other that, are aligned and want to build towards something together. So being able to kind of identify in that way is very powerful. Of course, it's also a privilege and cannot be safe for many people to have something that says psychedelics just visibly on them. So, that's why it's also important to dive into this design world beyond words as well, because that can offer kind of a safer route of sending that signal without endangering yourself. So I do want to also honor that. And, I've also believe that if people do have the safety and privilege to do that by kind of being outspoken or public about that, it contributes to destigmatizing the substances.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I love me some stickers. Natalie and I were just in Sarajevo, and we had a taxi driver. And it's always fun when we tell people what we do. But a sticker, very simple. Also, they're fun, but it's also an easy, low barrier entry. Psychedelics are allowed to people, especially when they don't know it. So a sticker just kind of a gift from a potential ally that says, "Come check us out." Really simple way. and then it's small. So it's an easy way to invite people to the world and, to come learn more about it. I also think building community should be fun. I think because of the last 50, 40, 30 years, we've had to validate psychedelics so much. So we've leaned so much on the science, which again, don't want to downplay the science, work from maps. Science is incredibly important. But we have kind of pushed fun aside because we want to be like, oh, we actually don't do the hippie fun music stuff. Like this is strict, double blind testing stuff. So I think, but communities like to have fun, and fun is a big healer. So when doing these projects, like one project that we're working on right now is we're working with some musicians through Spotify, and we're doing a New York Street poster campaign. So we have artists make playlists, and we do this giant street campaign, and there's QR codes, and through that QR codes, well, so one, the public gets to listen to some amazing artists that we're working with in their playlists, what they like to listen to while in a psychedelic experience. But two, when they go to the playlist itself, or the webpage itself, there's access to integration workbooks, there's access to our courses, there's access to ways to get involved. So it's simple things like that where you can design a campaign that's using playlists of music that people enjoy, and they can just go to the subway to listen to, but then at the same time bring in the community by giving them these resources and allowing them to learn in a way, again, that meets people where they're at. And then we're even going to do like our community playlists where our community can send in the songs they want to listen to, and then we start having our Maps community playlists that we can kind of connect with each other and see what we're all listening to currently.
And not to mention that music helps design a psychedelic experience and, really plays such a large role. But Devon, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing, can you share a bit about your amazing work with More Life Community and how you use design as a way of advocacy and building community?
Yeah, no, for sure. So More Life is a harm reduction fashion company. Again, it's just using fun and design as a very mindful Trojan horse to a larger problem. My co-founder and I, we've lost family and dear friends to overdose, and it's a heavy topic, and it's a way that you can't just walk straight into every door and talk about. So we thought, hey, as creative people and people who love others, which is a way that we can spark this conversation in a way that's both fun, easygoing, but can again normalize something. So what we do with More Life is we do custom clothes with like upcycled army jackets, with t-shirts, hats, cowboy hats, and they'll say messages like something like one says "pretty girls test their drugs" and all sorts of fun stuff. So one is like it's a messaging billboard that people can wear and go out and start a conversation. But two, again, we always want to pair our work with actionable items, with educational items. So every time you buy a shirt, every time you get whatever from one of the events that we have, we give you harm reduction resources. We give you resources for dancing. We give you fentanyl test strips. We sometimes give you Narcan in certain cities and states. So again, it's a fun way that we can approach these larger problems and allow people who don't want to be super loud about it sometimes. Again, I have a lot of people in my community who don't feel comfortable talking in groups, but they'll wear a shirt expressing what they mean and what they want to say, or they don't know how to approach someone with that topic, but with the creative means that allows people to approach them, which again really opens up the conversation. And it's fun. I can't lie to y'all. It's also really fun designing clothes. So, but
it's really. I think this thing about the billboard is something that's just really powerful to also just consider. And we kind of talked about that in fashion, but it's not only in fashion, right? How else do people design their social media, their way of presenting in so many ways? That just is such a key in story building and shifting perception, both individually and as a collective. And in thinking about that, how do you, or what unique design challenges do you arise when we're thinking about integrating psychedelic themes into mainstream cultural platforms?
Challenges in the psychedelic space, whatever do you mean? I mean, there's a few, like it's a business now. And when something evolves to a business, there's innately problems and struggles that come with with the strategies to scale something, and not all in a negative or malice way. But kind of going back to the difference between being educators and advertisers, it's a huge difference. Sometimes it can look similar outside looking in, but the actual intention there is a big difference. You know, when you advertise, you're having to only say the good in something to try to sell someone over. You're trying to convince someone of something because you have a dollar tied to it. So you're not going to waste time talking about risk or downfalls or unsuccessful things. But when you're an educator, it's a full vertical of health there. But one thing that's hard about being an educator, and one of the challenges is, and this is with all design, psychedelics is an umbrella concept, right? Like you're not going to be able to kind of please everybody because there's so much depth in every single aspect of psychedelics from every part of cultural usage you can think of. So you're going to have to get used to one, listening to the community, learning from the community, but also taking hopefully constructive. Sometimes it's a straight up criticism, but hopefully it's constructive criticism. I mean, Natalie, you notice we deal with this all the time. I mean, if we post too much research, our spiritual community says we're not validating them. We talk too much about the spiritual side. Our research community says we're not validating the science, and those feelings are very valid. Psychedelics is this very unique case where all of us came here in such a profound way that we feel so heavy about it. If Nike designs a bad shoe, there's not a lot of people saying much, but Nike didn't save many people's lives or didn't really affect many people's lives. So yeah, a challenge is one, how to make sure that your intentions is always an educational way, that you're showing this to the best of your ability, the full story, what you're trying to portray, and then how do you handle the response to it?
I think that
I think that's one of the biggest ones.
When that example you're giving of like the researchers or people connected to spirituality more, or of course that's not all these separate buckets. There's lots of overlap, but I think a unique and cool challenge, well, maybe not unique only to psychedelics, but something we really face is how to communicate also through design and beyond, through our designing our language and our narratives that are really authentic to our principles and honoring where we come from, but also kind of designing a big enough space that all different communities can feel connected and see themselves reflected. And, of course, we also do a lot of kind of work. Like it's not only one big thing. There can be lots of smaller ways of communicating, but I think there is something really powerful when you're able to find that bigger design, that bigger concept that connects beyond. That is something that is powerful and something we engage with. And I think in particular, this, I mentioned this a bit before, but it has come up a lot in psychedelic fields of people are kind of distancing themselves from psychedelics, like the culture of psychedelics in the past. Or is there a way of using design and narrative and research and other things to build on that and kind of expand it and make it more accessible to people, but without kind of casting it aside? And I think on the flip side, there's a lot, and this is, I guess, not unique to psychedelics, but I also see that design can build false trust sometimes. Like, sometimes it can really help, it can deteriorate trust, but sometimes people see a certain design that kind of implies that people are maybe connected to, working with indigenous communities. And then when they research a bit more, that org, wasn't really doing that, what they kind of designed and how they posited themselves. So I think there's a lot to kind of delve into there. But I think the unique challenges are actually like uniquely exciting opportunities too, because psychedelics really allow us to creatively design things so differently, have so much color and space and movement and things that, and hope that it feels really, to me, also exciting. It's like this challenge that is really needed. And also seeing how people like, my mother who, has never had experiences with psychedelics, but she connects to certain like colorful psychedelic patterns, but certain ones maybe not as much, and understanding what that, how that allows her to connect into something that she wouldn't otherwise. But I'm seeing that we're at time. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity for us to have this conversation and this panel. And thank you for taking a chance with us. I know, as you said, this is an experiment to have a conversation, but Devon and I both do so much going back and forth and thinking about this that we felt like that would be, most suited. So thank you.
It's been great. It's been really exciting. One thing I want to say before we leave, though, I just want to challenge you because I was thinking about it. I think one challenge too is because there's a big learning curve to get into space sometimes. And because of that, you want to respect it so much that a lot of people are afraid to speak outside the lines of some things or design outside the lines of something. So we end up creating this echo chamber of language or design or schemes or visuals or whatever. Um, and we kind of forget that the psychedelic space is such a small portion of the world right now. So I think just always keep that in mind, that always respect those who are here and their ideas. But also remember there's a large population that have no idea who we are and they think and look at things differently. And let's make sure to include those voices and those ideas in our design moving forward.